Sue, I need to ask a question. Can I ask you this real quick? Many years ago, when I was in college, we had to read this book by Richardson called Clarissa that went on for 7 volumes, and it was in the epistolary form. And I remember the teacher saying there's a reason that he uses this form. And I remember from the very first class, Donovan mentioning this was episodic, and it is. And it's an interesting concept about why did he make it an episodic thing. And you know what else is episodic? The Gospels.
Yes. Epistolary is different from episodic.
Oh, I know that. I know that's letters. I mean, I know that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know that. But it is episodic. And so I'm thinking the style, the reason she chose that way of presenting the story, there must be a reason for it. And of course,
I know.
Christian's way was to present different people's view, kind of like Rashomon or one of those things, Ship of Fools or, but I wasn't sure about this one. I wasn't sure about why the episodic nature of it. And so that was what I wondered if you thought anything of that.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it at the beginning of class. You want to do that?
Well, I mean, I want you to be.
Well, it's an important question, and it sort of fits in with what I was going to talk about anyway.
Okay. Well, each one of the episodes tells us something else about the character. I think that's sort of what happens. And I mean,
That's right.
It's very touching. I mean, I've listened to it and I also read it, but I was listening to it again today, and that time when Father Joseph is going to leave and Father Latour is feeling it's much harder for him to let go of his friend. And Bishop reflects on the fact, Joseph reflects on the fact that we're very different, that I didn't think about how different we are. Whereas he seems like the weaker character in the beginning. I mean, he's weaker, physically weaker, and yet he seems to have more of a survival skill or a way to get along with people or something. He relates well.
Look at how you're all over my lesson.
Oh dear.
You're doing this beautifully.
Well, you told us to pay attention to the relationship, so
that's what we're going to do.
I'm still struck.
I think that also plays into why it's episodic. And we'll talk about that.
Okay.
I'm just still struck, Sue, at the beauty of the writing.
Oh,
I know.
It's gorgeous. It's beautiful.
I mean, it's so clean and yet descriptive, and the her ability to inhabit emotionally the different characters. I just am really enjoying it.
I know. I was thinking that same thing today, where I was going, boy, this is beautiful writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reading the
Hi, Jane.
The description of the soup
Yeah.
that he gives, and the way that he sort of traces it back to the different cultures and heritage. If there's anybody that's interested in that kind of thing, there's a great Netflix series called High on the Hog that traces African American food.
One of my faves.
It's a great series.
It is. It's beautiful.
I missed the soup thing.
I ordered that book, Ray, after watching the one about, I'm trying to remember the name of it, about the president's chefs.
Yes.
Yeah.
President chefs that brought over the sauce oven and the delicate sauces and all that kind of stuff, and then sort of what really happened to them. After they sort of one of them disappeared, and the other one, I think, was he freed maybe?
Yes.
But I thought the interesting part of that was when they talked about taking the slaves to Boston, and if you kept a slave there for more than 6 months, they were free. So
Mhm.
they would be there in the lap of luxury for 4 months or 5 months, and then they get shipped back to the farm.
Ugh.
That's right. I'm teaching the Underground Railroad to my freshmen, and we're
And they're
gonna start.
understanding it.
I mean, partly the class I'm teaching is the introductory course for our English majors, but the class became so popular that now I don't have any English majors in there. And so when I picked the book, I was thinking about a different audience. So I'm hoping they can handle it.
So what you're saying is this is another area of your life that you've lost complete control of.
Yeah, exactly. I should be getting used to it, but I'm not.
Well, you should be happy that it's so popular.
I know. It is a stunning book. Have you all read it?
I have.
Cole-
Is it called
It's-
High on the Hog? The
No,
book?
no, that's a
No.
television.
Underground Railroad.
Yeah, the
Underground
Underground Railroad by
It's about like
Colson.
Harriet Tubman and the
No,
No,
it's,
no.
No.
it's Colson Whitehead.
Okay.
And it came out in, I think, 2017, and it won the National Book Award and a
Yeah.
Pulitzer.
It's fiction. It's not nonfiction.
Oh,
It's totally postmodern,
Yeah.
but stunning. So we'll see. I don't know. We'll see how the kids take it.
And
Yeah,
that's the first novel for him, isn't it?
No, he had written a lot of books, and his books, he does something really different every time. I mean, one of his books was about zombies. But this was the one that sort of made him super famous.
I was talking with Don Schulze the other day. He stopped me and said, I wanted to mention, you said you couldn't completely get through Beloved. You'll never be able to get through Underground Railroad. So
No.
It's tough, but
Yeah.
it's so good.
yeah.
Hi,
Well,
Brent.
Sue, our time is upon us, and John Bailey is now on, so that's a good talisman. Here comes the Harrises and Susan Hassel and the Davidsons. So we, I think, have a quorum of, there are a number of people here who have been in Poland, the Professional Order of English Majors.
That's right.
So
We'll make you some degrees.
exactly. Yeah.
At school, if my students take 5 Trout classes, they get a degree from Trout University,
Ah,
and it has a fish on it.
Nice.
An
Are you all
official.
ready?
I think we are. Let's go ahead. A few other people may join us, but I want to honor our time. So let's go ahead.
So Sheppy asked me a question before many of you got here that I do want to address, and it kind of fits beautifully into what I would like to kind of cover tonight, and that is why you think this novel is structured the way it is. It is episodic, yes? And it's not always linear, right?
No. Mhm.
So the academic answer to that is in part because it is a modernist novel where you have a slew of American writers experimenting with how they present a narrative, and many of them are trying after World War I to shake people out of traditional ways of reading, having that sort of realistic linear plot. And so when you get a novel like this, you go, okay, that's modernist. And then you go, but why is she doing it? What is she accomplishing by presenting the narrative in these sometimes maybe loosely connected episodes? What do you all think? Does the structure bother you?
Well, I have to think about it a lot. Now, when did they say this? When were the two of them together? When did this happen? So I keep sort of rewinding sometimes.
Beautiful. And that is
Maybe that's what she
the
wants.
modernist. Well, this drives my students crazy because I'm teaching a modernist novels class right now, because what they realize is, as you say, they have to really pay attention. And the modernists wanted that because they felt that leading up to and then after World War I, that they had been betrayed and they were disillusioned with the stories they had inherited from American writers, from politicians, about America, its moral values, what it stood for. And that war shook so many people to the core. And one of my favorite Cather novels is a World War I novel called One of Ours. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Yeah.
It's really good. And so they were trying to find ways to make readers create meaning on their own, instead of just blindly accepting and following what they had been taught.
The other thing is that life isn't always that way.
Correct.
I mean, let's face it, it jumps around a lot.
Right.
And John
so
Lake Ray, he wanted his readers to have to work.
Who did?
John Le Carre.
Oh yeah. I mean, they everybody after World War I is trying to make reading more difficult. And apart from the sort of lighter reading we might do for, other reasons, you have to think, why are they doing this? What's the function? Is this what I want from reading? And what they're trying to do is make you pay attention. So I was just talking about the Underground Railroad and this Colson Whitehead book that I'm getting ready to start. I hope it's not a mistake. And what Whitehead is doing is talking about the institution of slavery in America. But the way he does it is he goes back to when he was a child, and he remembered that when little kids learn about the Underground Railroad, they think it's a real railroad, right? Rather than a series of, strategic pathways to freedom on land. And so in that novel, it's a railroad. The slaves
he describes stations and all that as if it were very real.
And so on the one hand, you're going, well, this is crazy. And on the other hand, you step back and go, what is he trying to do here? And it does connect to what we're reading. And what I mean is, part of what he's doing is mixing absolute verifiable historical fact with how he imagines slavery working. And so he too is playing on that fine line or liminal space between fact, myth, lore, and legend. And
Well-
so, go ahead, John Bailey.
Well, I'll just stake my ground here early. I didn't like Colson Whitehead's novel at all, and I'm sure I'm in a minority there, but I didn't like the approach. And we studied another novel that dealt with a player in the underground. I can't remember which one, whether it wasn't Jasmine Ward's novel, but there was another one that we did that dealt with, or either I've read one, and which I like so much more. His approach to the Underground Railroad really did not engage me in the whole issues that were faced there.
I think it shook me up more than it did anything else.
Okay, first of all, you would love it if I taught it. Number two, but John, what you're saying is the same criticism this novel has gotten historically. That it's not an engaging novel. The writing is beautiful. Cather is good at describing scenery, but what is the novel actually about? And what is engaging about it? And that's what these modernists and postmodernists face every time they write a novel. So here's what I would say. Go ahead, Hank.
You gave John the floor a couple of minutes, and I'm going to ask for equal time.
All right, give it. You got it.
What I think it's about is what the ancients called the fen places. The place where the sacred or the eternal or whatever scrapes up against reality. Physical reality, I guess.
Now you're talking about Cather's novel, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, because I didn't say I disliked Willa Cather's novel. I said I didn't like Colson Whitehead's Underground Railroad.
So here's
I kind of took that point. I just want I brought you up, John, because I wanted equal time.
There you go.
Hard to get with John Bailey.
Sorry, I'll be quiet.
All right, here's what I would say.
Well, let me say one more thing, Sue.
Go ahead.
The stone lips.
That was my next line.
All right, then I'm going to hush up.
We are going to talk about exactly what you're getting at with that particular section chapter, because you're dead on, I think. So, oh my gosh. So I disagreed with John Bailey and agreed with Hank. The world is twisting. All right. So here's what I would say. As we move forward, I want you to think about why you think she's presenting the narrative episodically, that it does not have this linear structure. Part of that could go to, and this is where I want to start, and then we're going to get into two of the most fascinating sections of the novel. So let's spend some time tonight thinking about the relationship between Latour and Joseph. Wait, is that right? Yeah. Because there are many critics who fundamentally believe what this novel is about is the relationship, the love between these two men. But we haven't really kind of spent some time establishing what kinds of characters they are. Others argue that this novel is essentially about Latour, and that's why Cather doesn't address head on some of those more difficult political colonializing questions. All right, so let's just start. What about Latour? What do you think about him? What kind of character is he? What is his function?
He's French. He loves to tell people how French he
Yeah.
is.
He's French. He's more cosmopolitan. Apparently, he's a good manager, according to the people who are recommending him. And he apparently knows all the social graces and what to do correctly and everything. Joseph, however, is the one who relates to people really well and finds friends wherever he goes. And
was willing to step out of his box.
Yeah.
More than Latour is.
Very good. Very good. Do you like him as a character? Is he sympathetic?
Yeah, I think they both are in different ways.
All right. Like what?
Well,
what do you like about Latour?
He's a man of action. I mean, he's the one that pulls the gun on the bad guy and tells him, go get the burros out. And I think and isn't he the one that talks that guy into giving him 2 of the burros?
Oh, yeah. What did he say? He was comforted out of him or some.
Yeah. Well, do we all agree that he's a man of action?
That was Joseph that did that, right?
Yeah, I think he's more a man of contemplation.
Yeah. Latour.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Latour, he was a stay-at-home. He was a stay-at-home priest. He's
a thinker.
Okay, y'all. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
And
again, we're getting a D- for today's work, John.
No. Listen, you're all right. And what I mean is, okay, one of the essential questions of this novel as we move forward is, if this is a novel about Latour, and remember, Willa Cather didn't have to fictionalize this character. She could have just made him who he was. Some of the people in the novel are real and they're named in a realistic way, but she fictionalizes him. And so that's when you have this sort of mixing of reality, myth, and imagination. And let's start at the beginning. You're absolutely right. He is French.
He knows his wines.
Yes.
Remember the bottle, he said they didn't know what it was. They didn't know anything about this wine, how wonderful it was. They didn't know what they had. That stuck out to me. I mean,
good.
And he does that about a lot of things.
Yes.
He makes those kinds of statements about the culture he grew up in, I guess.
That's right. And so in many ways, he is the European man, right? Who comes from a history and a series of traditions that are going to mark the kind of person he is. And one of his attitudes going into the new territory, which was, of course, a very European attitude, was that, you know, the Europeans have this long history of civilization and religion, and they are coming into this new world that by legend is the wilderness, is, you know,
And savage.
savage.
Uncivilized.
Correct. And so when he goes in, particularly at the beginning, we've got to think about his attitudes towards not just the priests that are there before him, but about the Mexican characters and the Native American characters. So then your question as a reader becomes, is this a character that Cather has developed over the course of the novel? On the one hand, yes, he seems more contemplative than Joseph. But on the other hand, Joseph tells you early in the novel that he's the one who wants a life of contemplation. And then the whole middle section of the novel is Latour going out into the territories. And so you've got two men that you can variously argue are contemplative and men of action. What we have to think about is how they differ. Most people agree that, you know, the Latour we know at the beginning of the novel seems, you know, like this gentle spirit, that he's obviously educated. He is driven by this desire or this vocation to go in and clean up the messes that these older priests have fallen into and impose
what he thinks is right.
This idea of the Catholic Church.
Can I ask just an off the cuff question?
Sure.
How did Willa Cather feel about the Catholic Church?
So there's mixed information about that.
Because I feel like it's very mixed in this book. I feel like sometimes it sounds critical, sometimes it sounds not so critical. And I just wondered if there was anything in her background that spoke to that.
No, except I think, so this is where the novel is really hard and vague, because if Cather is doing her job as a writer, then what we have to think about is not her and her feelings about Catholicism,
No.
but the way in which it plays out among the characters. Because some people criticize the way she addresses the whole Christian mission, and some people criticize the way she seems critical of the Catholic Church in particular, but she hated those criticisms. Her attitude about the novel was, it's a story. And your job as a reader is to figure out what the story is about. And I think I'm safe in saying that what Cather would say is that this story is about Latour, this character Latour, who starts out maybe as one kind of person, but then may develop over the course of the novel. And so that becomes our job from this point forward. Do you see progression in this character? And the really cool ways that you can mark this is by looking at these two important chapters, the Mass at Acoma and the Snake Root, book 4. And so let's play with this. Do you want to do that and see where we get? So remember at the beginning of the novel, and so if this is a book about Latour and his self-actualization. Then if you go back to the beginning and think episodically, where is he in the very beginning? We just talked about that. Do you remember?
Very European.
No, I'm not the
In
Rome
the very
section.
beginning, he's lost in the desert.
He's
Oh,
lost.
right.
Beautiful. So at the beginning, he is lost. She has
And he
him
knows it.
Yes, he knows it. And he's lost in this space that is unrecognizable to him. And then what happens to lead him forward?
Well, he finds the crucifix tree to pray first.
Yes. He finds miraculously this geography that to him reminds him, or he calls it, the crucifixion tree.
And then doesn't somebody take his bridle and lead him out, and that's a saint?
Yes, beautiful. So at the beginning of the novel, even though we're shifting around in time, we know at the beginning, as she presents Latour, he's lost in the wilderness.
Mhm.
And part of what is guiding him is this faith, this fundamental, mystical, miraculous thing
Miraculous. Mhm.
that is occurring for him.
Mhm.
The interesting thing to me is, his trip to Santa Fe, it takes him a long time, but he makes it. He gets there and nobody believes he's what he's supposed to be. So he's lost in the desert at the beginning of the book, coming back from Mexico.
Yes. And not only are the people that he encounters unsure of exactly who he is, as we get into, books 3 and 4, you watch the ways in which they resist him. And we've already talked about, the more philosophical issues about, him coming into this territory and assuming that the Christian mission is the right one. But at the same time, what we see as we move forward episodically is that he is encountering these different people and kinds of people. And there are these lovely, generous, kind, sacrificial moments that represent the best of what his mission is supposed to be about. Yes?
Mhm.
So then we get to book 3, which I think is super cool and super hard.
Sue, could I talk 1 minute about the tree?
Yeah.
What I thought when I read that is in Exodus, when Moses is out, I think there's a couple of accounts of the burning bush. I might be wrong, but I may be right. And in one of them, he turns aside, and one of them he's up on the mountain approaching maybe the Lord, and on his way he turns aside and sees this bush burning, and from that bush, from that thin place, comes the revelation or whatever. I think that's she wouldn't mind us thinking that.
I don't think she would mind it at all. And throughout this narrative, you are going to see these very clear connections and echoes from the Christian Bible that transcend the boundaries of ethnicity and ethnocentricity. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So when we get to book 3, okay, so he goes from being lost trying to assist people to this section. Now, I'm on page 81. I don't know what edition you have, but it's the beginning of book 3, the Mass at Acoma, which is a very difficult section. So let's see what we can do with it. So during the first year after his arrival in Santa Fe, the bishop was actually in his diocese only about 4 months. So far, I'm in the second paragraph, Bishop Latour had been mainly employed on business that took him far away from his vicariate. His great diocese was still an unimaginable mystery to him. Super important. And again, listen to the echoes and resonances of words like miracle, mystery, because when we go into the next book, we're going to get into all Hank Abbott's issues about the stone lips, which is also awesome. So we talked about this, the business of church, but he has an idea of what he wants to accomplish, but this idea of completing his mission is still an unimaginable mystery. He was eager to be abroad in it, to know his people, to escape for a little from the cares of building and founding, and to go westward among the old isolated Indian missions. Here, 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 and finally cloud set Acoma. So he wants to know the people. He doesn't want to just sit in one place, as you're going to see some of the older priests are doing. He doesn't want to sit in one place. He wants to get out and get to know these people. I'm not sure this is the same Latour we saw at the very beginning. Is he developing, and in what way? But to get to know his people, he has to have a guide. And who is his guide?
Indian.
Yes, Jacinto, a young Indian from the Pecos Pueblo, whom he employed as guide, set off to visit the Indian missions in the West. So he hires an Indian guide. And from this moment forward in the next 2 books, you have to really pay attention to what is going on with Latour and this guide. So first he decides to go see Padre Gallegos, and he is a guy who is having a great time as a priest. He had many friends in the American colony with whom he played poker and went hunting when he was not dancing with the Mexicans. His cellar was well stocked with wines. He was genuinely hospitable. The Padre was adored by a rich Mexican widow who was hostess at his supper parties. All right. So this is the guy that has all of the parrots. What is that about?
Doesn't sound like Latour's mission.
No, it does not. And I got those mixed up. So Gallego is the one, this is really important. Do you think he is corrupt or not?
Who?
Gallego, the guy that, you know, he has he parties. He's the one who dances all the time, and he has gout because he dances so much. And when Latour shows up, he said, asked when he had last celebrated Mass at Acoma, he made no direct reply. It used to be his custom, he said, to go there in Passion Week, but the Acoma Indians were unreclaimed heathen at heart, and he had no wish to be bothered with the mass.
Mm.
And you're asking us what we think about this man, Sue? Is that what you're just asking us?
He's super popular.
I don't hear anybody in our group though saying this is a man we could get behind. I hadn't heard that.
Right.
Well, he's popular with one ethnic group in the parish, right?
Yes.
So he's cuddled up with the Mexicans and embraced that culture and has rejected the other culture.
Very smart guy.
I mean, you're on the other side of the ocean now, and you work the system the way that it works. And so you're kind of stepping into my world now. Am I really a bad guy?
Yes,
When in Rome.
this is going to set up a series of complications. That is, yes, he is working in foreign territory, but you're going to see him go through this series of conflicts, sort of, with these various priests who are already embedded in this territory. And why do you think Cather is doing that? I mean, it's hard to keep him straight. I just messed one up.
I mean, to me, it's the clear clash between the French ordered system that he's used to sort of working in and the New World Wild West. Here we go.
I think it really happened. I think that section is pretty realistic.
Yeah, but what's the point? And I think it's going to go closer to what Guy just said.
Which one?
Any ideas?
Which was?
That here with the first priest, you have someone who has fully sided with one culture and is completely dismissing the native culture, the Native Americans. And so he doesn't come off very well at all. And yes, it probably is realistic when you go into a new place. No matter what your mission is, you have to read the landscape literally, but also figuratively in terms of how does power work here?
You also have to take your past self with you.
Yes. And so with the first priest, what he doesn't like him. And remember, he wants to go to this other place, Isleta, and he doesn't even want to ask the other priest to go. And the other priest comes out and with his leg all wrapped up, suggesting he can't go. So I'm on 84, a couple of pages in. Father Latour's spirits rose. It was beautiful, that warm, rich whiteness of the church and the clustered town, shaded by a few bright acacia trees, with their intense blue-green, like the color of old paper window blinds. So when he goes to Isleta, the priest's house was white within and without, like all the Isleta houses, and was almost as bare as an Indian dwelling. The old man was poor and too soft-hearted to press the Pueblo people for pesos. Father Jesus revealed that he was simple, almost to childishness, and very superstitious. But there was a quality of golden goodness about him. So this is the priest in Isleta, where everything is white, but the narrator is quick to point out that it's not just white in the sense that it's super clean or pure, but also that they have the minerals to whitewash the entire place. So Father Jesus, who is impoverished and so kind-hearted he won't ask the people for money, is surrounded by parrots. What is that about, y'all? What is happening there? This is important, Hank Abbott, because it's,
What chapter we in?
this is the beginning. It's the wooden parrot.
Okay, I got you.
So
Oh,
I'm
It's the
like,
important part of the parrots are a critical part of their culture.
yes,
Right.
And so he's valuing that. We don't have a sense that he's making, money off of it, but I see it as a affirmation of their culture and his sensitivity to that.
good.
He
Now,
was willing to accept their use of the parrot.
and not only does he accept it, look what he has in his house. He has this wooden parrot.
Mhm.
And he says, so it was strangely lifelike, a wooden pattern of parrots, as it were. I see you have found my treasure. That, your grace, is probably the oldest thing in the pueblo, older than the pueblo itself. The parrot, Father Jesus said, had always been the bird of wonder and desire to the Pueblo Indians. There was in Isleta a parrot skull of great antiquity. His wooden bird he had bought from an old man who was much indebted to him. The priest fondly believed that it was a portrait done from life of one of those rare birds that in ancient times were carried up alive all the long trail of the tropics. What is happening? And why am I picking on Hank Abbott?
Because he needs to be picked on is one reason, but besides that, let's keep in mind here, the parrot is not native to New Mexico.
No.
All of that culture was brought there to the Indians who adopted that. And so that relationship has evolved over a lot of years.
Yes.
And that culture that Hank has very articulately suggested that we want to talk about, that animist kind of spirituality,
Yes.
which is embedded in the culture, is also a product of what they brought, somebody has brought to them.
I was going to say they
Beautiful.
This may be too simplistic, but if you're familiar, if you know the Southwest, it's virtually monochromatic.
Yes.
We keep running into the same description of sandhill. So you put a bird in it that's yellow, blue, red, it's got to stand out. It's got to be something special when all around you is either blue above or red around you.
Yes.
A great deal of their religion, particularly of the Kiva religion, uses the bird to speak of the mystery that he explained. And while we are able to, through trade records, be able to see that these are not indigenous to the Southwest, there were other birds, very colorful birds, that are. And what occurred, and I think most archaeologists would agree on this now, is that what they were doing is essentially sharing the beautiful feathers of, say, the desert cardinal, or of the raven, or of the eagle, in turns with the mystery of the birds of further south. And so it was an exchange of the powers that essentially that they were relying on. I'd like to add another dimension from the perspective of native writers looking at Willa Cather. They couldn't care less about the relationship between Latour and
Other guy.
They're very concerned and focus on what they see as Cather's genius in really showing the competition between the power of priests, whether it would be the priest of the Roman Catholic Church, whether it would be the priests of the Mexican community that had gone without Vatican leadership for almost 200 years, and most importantly, where they see her being most inadequate, the priests of the Kiva religion. And the chapter on the Mass at Acoma is where they see the weakest, both the genius and the weakest of Cather's book.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think, okay, I'm so excited because you're moving in the right direction in terms of what is going on here in terms of this exchange between cultures. And when we get further into Acoma and then the next section, what you see Cather exploring is this sort of fundamental idea of how different cultures may be describing this same sense of mystery and the miraculous in different ways. And that's when you get into the stone lips and this idea that consistently you will have these characters think or say out loud, this is older than time. This is old, this is from the beginning. And you go, okay, what beginning are we talking about? Are we measuring whatever is divine, whatever is mysterious or miraculous through our own framework and lenses? Or can we think of a bigger, broader, more syncretic idea of God? Do you get what I'm saying? And I love this thing about the birds, because I think you're exactly right. You know, birds in Native American folklore play an incredibly important role in terms of the messages they bring, the connections that they have to the Great Spirit, etc. And here you have,
it's almost Egyptian.
Say what?
It's almost Egyptian.
Well, sure. And I think that's what you're all getting to, is that you have the way the world works is a blending of, or maybe she's suggesting the best we can aim for is an understanding and a blending of these ideas without feeling threatened. And if that is the direction of Latour's development, that could be really special. But I don't think he's there yet, certainly not in the section at Acoma. And this is partly why I love Jacinto, because when he's talking about Acoma, he says the Laguna Indians call Snowbird Mountain. That is very nice, said the bishop. Oh, that is a pretty name. Oh, Indians have nice names too. I love that line because there's Jacinto sticking it to Latour in the nicest possible way. But it says he replied quickly with a curl of the lip. And then he says, aren't you a little too young to be doing this? And, Latour says, well, I'm old at heart. So then you watch Jacinto asking him these very kind of philosophical, spiritual questions, this guy he's hired to be his guide, when he says, what do you think about the stars? And he says, what do you think about the stars, Padre? The wise men tell us they are worlds like ours. I don't think so. That's what he says. I think not. I think not. I think they are leaders, great spirits. And watch this. Perhaps they are, said the bishop with a sigh. So,
I'm willing to entertain that idea.
Or he's just like giving up, right? But look what he says. Whatever they are great. So he says he was beginning to have some sort of human companionship with this Indian boy. The truth was, Jacinto liked the bishop's way of meeting people, thought he had the right tone. So then he goes into Acoma. But I want you to note that, okay, no, you tell me, what's his attitude once he gets there? Do you remember?
Understand what significance can he put on it, or does he?
Well, what is Acoma?
It's a mesa and a high place, and the first response that Latour had was, why would anybody want to live there? There's no water, there's no
greenery, nothing.
Yeah, nothing. So. And
what's the response?
That there are a lot of different ways to live, basically. That you can find sustenance in different ways.
Beautiful, beautiful. And then he has that great line where he says, Acomas carry. And
I love the reflection on these people needed, like the Old Testament people, rock, and they've chosen to live on the rock.
That's right.
I thought that was kind of a neat insight.
Yes.
Here,
and,
has anybody in the group, have you ever been to Mesa Verde?
Yes.
It's an amazing place. And her description of it just brings it to life. It's incredible, really. So she does
absolutely
a great job with that.
So John, are you talking about Mesa Verde or are you talking about Acoma?
I'm actually talking about Mesa Verde. I don't remember Acoma. I've been in that area, but I don't know. So talk about that.
I think what is so important, and I think that Cather, in the words of the characters, captures what is still, in fact, very much a part of the people of Acoma, and even in the way that they have been addressing the pandemic, is that they are a very vulnerable people. They are trapped between the aggression of the Navajos to the north and the Apaches to the south. They have endured and continue to have the long-term memory of almost being wiped out on a regular basis. And then the mysterious thing which has happened to half of the Acoma, of where through act of, actually probably an earthquake, the competing mesa that was part of Acoma collapsed, and the people couldn't get down from the top of the mesa, and they starved.
Great history. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
has happened, by the way, on other places of the Southwest as well, where people have gone to the security of the high mesas
Of height.
in hopes of trying to avoid being annihilated as far east as the fight with the Comanches, for example, and only to have then a natural catastrophe that happens, and it must be an act of the gods.
Yes.
That's great stuff. And I'm glad to hear that, get that education. That's good.
Well, and she sort of moves around some of these issues when she gets to the legend of Fray Baltazar. And so let's at least finish this before we go. I do want to underscore what Glenn was just saying about this idea of the rock and suffering, but also perhaps this sense of sanctuary and how tenuous that
safety doesn't last.
that connection can be. All this plain the bishop gathered had once been the scene of a periodic manhunt. These Indians, born in fear and dying by violence for generations, had at last taken this leap away from the earth, and on that rock had found the hope of all suffering and tormented creatures: safety. They came down to the plain to hunt and to grow their crops, but there was always a place to go back to. The rock of Acoma had never been taken by a foe, but once by Spaniards in armor. The rock, when one came to think of it, was the utmost expression of human need. God, that's beautiful. Even mere feeling yearned for it. It was the highest comparison of loyalty in love and friendship. Christ himself had used that comparison for the disciple to whom he gave the keys of his church. And the Hebrews of the Old Testament, always being carried captive into foreign lands, their rock was an idea of God, the only thing their conquerors could not take away from them. So one of the great conflicts in this novel is this idea of yearning for safety, for a place, for, as John Bailey would say, home, and how often impermanent or precarious that yearning is. But that's another thing that connects every culture. You know, that's our old friend James Baldwin. How we suffer and how we triumph is always the same. Please note, though, before we end this section, and I know we're at time, but I'm just going to finish, that even though Latour is getting and reflecting on some things, this is not a good experience for him, because it says on page 100 in my text, he held a service there before midday, and he had never found it so hard to go through the ceremony of the Mass. And he compares the natives to turtles and says those shell-like backs behind him might be saved by baptism and divine grace, as undeveloped infants are. So that's a judgment, friends, but hardly through any experience of their own, he thought. When he blessed them and sent them away, it was with a sense of inadequacy and spiritual defeat.
So he realizes that.
Go ahead.
He realizes that. So he realizes the limitations of what he's doing.
Yes, that's it. That's the right answer. So if Latour is going to gain eventually some sense of self-actualization, does he have to come to peace with a sense of limitation? What is actually possible in the building of this diocese and trying to impose one vision on a group of people who have a different but not completely separate view of how the world works. I do want next time, gosh, do you think we'll ever finish this book? Okay, we'll start with, well, it's because Glenn's so smart and everybody's so smart. I want to start with the legend of Fray Baltazar because it's an important nod at legends, but also what happens to this idea of a tyrannical priest who essentially enslaves the people at Acoma and then pays the price. But then we have to talk about the cave experience and let Hank Abbott stew on it and think it over, because it's a very essential section. And then Glenn can explain all the native mystery because it's fabulous, that section. Have you gotten that far? All right, so here's our dream. We'll get through at least.
Is there a chapter number?
Let's try to get to book 6, The Great Diocese.
Does that have a chapter?
Well, mine is separated by books.
Oh, okay.
And there are chapters within the books. So
Yeah.
The snake route is book 4. And then we have to talk about book 5 is Padre Martinez. Glenn, do you know Padre Martinez?
Yes.
So you'll have to help me with him because he's a very famous real person, real character. And the way in which he's depicted has been kind of controversial. You'll have to help us with that. And then Doña Isabella. You want to do that? Let's try. And then we'll have one more week to finish it out. And I do want you to think, remember, in that next section is when Joseph gets black measles. And that's where you begin to really maybe think about the connection between these two friends. Man, this book has a lot, doesn't it? I mean, it is the quietest book on the planet, but it has a billion things going on for really good thinkers, and that's what y'all are. So say your prayers and be good people and kind to everyone. That's my wish. All right, you guys. So I'll see you
Thanks,
next
Sue. I would just note at the end that Donovan has been remarkably quiet tonight.
Well, did he come in later? Donovan, did you come in later?
I came in late, yes.
Wow. Well,
Sorry.
He's holding it all in for next week.
You missed good stuff. You better rewind so you can hear how brilliant your flock is.
Oh, I know.
Thanks, Sue.
I love you. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
I should say before we leave everybody, next week there is a congregational dinner. And if anyone wants to come to that, I'll set up a room in the Overlook room that we can do this by hybrid. If you want to come to the dinner and stay. So.
Hey, you're having dinner?
We are. Do you want to come?
No, too scared.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm not scared for myself, but I am living in COVID soup and I don't want to risk anybody's health.
Yeah. I think you're not alone amongst the people on the meeting either. So
I mean,
we'll see who comes.
I'm at just in the middle of a bunch of sick 18-year-olds right now. And
Oh, dear.
I would die if something happened. Do you know what I mean?
Do.
All right. Love you guys. See you